On October 12, 1492, a small fleet of 3 Spanish ships reached land in the Bahamas, and the world was changed forever. Christopher Columbus's voyage connected 2 hemispheres that had been separated for thousands of years, triggering the most significant global transformation in human history. But what if Columbus had never sailed? What if the Americas remained hidden from European eyes for decades or even centuries longer? Today, we're exploring a world where the New World stayed new just a little bit longer. Christopher Columbus wasn't the first European to reach the Americas. Vikings landed in Newfoundland around the year 1000. But their settlements failed, and the discovery was forgotten. Columbus's voyage was different because it stuck. It created permanent contact between the Old World and the New, leading to colonization, empire building, and massive population transfers. But Columbus's voyage almost didn't happen. Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella initially rejected his proposal. He spent years begging for funding. Portugal, England, and France all turned him down. If just one more rejection had occurred, if the Spanish crown had remained skeptical, Columbus might have died an unknown sailor, and history would have taken a radically different path. In this alternate reality, Spain rejects Columbus permanently. He dies around 1510, bitter and unknown, convinced he could have found a western route to Asia but never getting the chance to prove it. But the Americas can't stay hidden forever. European maritime technology is advancing. Ships are getting better. Navigation improves. Eventually, someone else will make the journey. The question is when and who. Perhaps Portuguese explorers, while sailing around Africa to reach India, are blown off course by storms and accidentally reach Brazil in the early 1500s. Or maybe English or French explorers, seeking a northwest passage to Asia, stumble upon North America in the 1520s or 1530s. Let's say the discovery happens around 1520, roughly 30 years later than in our timeline. This delay seems small, but its consequences are enormous. Those extra 30 years give indigenous civilizations crucial additional time. The Aztec Empire in Mexico continues expanding and consolidating power. The Inca Empire in South America completes its road system and administrative reforms. Smaller tribes throughout the Americas continue their own developments. More importantly, some Native American societies might begin acquiring Old World technology through indirect contact. Vikings had brought limited goods centuries earlier. Asian fishermen occasionally reached the Pacific coast. Some trade goods might have filtered through, including potentially horses that escaped from earlier failed European expeditions or metal tools traded across vast networks. By 1520, some Native American groups might have limited exposure to horses, which would revolutionize their societies. Plains tribes become mobile cavalry forces decades earlier. Agricultural societies use horses for transportation and farming, increasing their productivity and military capabilities. The Aztecs and Incas, given more time, might develop more advanced metallurgy, better fortifications, or even early gunpowder weapons if knowledge filtered east from Asia across the Pacific. Here's where it gets interesting. In our timeline, Spain dominated early colonization. Spanish conquistadors brought a particular style: aggressive military conquest, forced conversion to Catholicism, the encomienda system that enslaved natives, and extraction of gold and silver. If Portugal discovers the Americas first, colonization might look different. The Portuguese, experienced from their African and Asian colonies, might focus more on coastal trading posts than inland conquest. They might establish partnerships with native rulers rather than immediately overthrowing them. If England or France makes first contact, colonization proceeds differently still. Without Spanish gold and silver flooding Europe early, other nations might pursue different economic models, perhaps focusing on agriculture, furs, or other resources rather than precious metals. The Columbian Exchange, the transfer of plants, animals, diseases, and people between hemispheres, still happens just later. This delay has profound implications. Diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza still devastate Native American populations who have no immunity. However, with 30 more years of population growth, indigenous numbers are higher when Europeans arrive. The diseases still kill vast numbers, perhaps 70 to 80% instead of 90-95%, but millions more survive. These survivors maintain their cultures, languages, and political structures more effectively. Instead of nearly complete cultural annihilation, native societies adapt and persist more robustly. American crops like potatoes, corn, and tomatoes reach Europe 30 years late. This means European population growth is delayed. The population boom that these nutrient-dense crops enabled happens in the 1550s instead of the 1520s. Europe has perhaps 10 to 20 million fewer people by 1600, which affects everything from warfare to colonization to economic development. Spain's rise to superpower status in the 1500s was built on American gold and silver. Without Columbus, Spain doesn't get this head start. When the Americas are finally discovered around 1520, the race is more competitive. Portugal, England, France, and Spain all scramble for colonies simultaneously.
Instead of Spanish dominance, we get a more balanced colonial competition from the start. North America might be divided between England and France 50 years earlier. South America could be split between Portugal and other powers rather than being overwhelmingly Spanish. The massive influx of precious metals that fueled European economy and caused inflation throughout the 1500s happens later and potentially more gradually, creating different economic conditions across Europe. The Protestant Reformation began in 1517, right in our alternate timeline's discovery period. In our history, Spanish gold helped fund Catholic counter-Reformation efforts. Without that immediate wealth, the Catholic Church is weaker financially during this critical period. Protestant movements might succeed more widely. More of Europe might become Protestant, fundamentally changing religious and political maps. The devastating religious wars of the 1500s and 1600s might be shorter or longer, depending on the changed balance of power. Fast forward to 2025 in this alternate timeline. The Americas were still colonized, but the different timing and circumstances created a different outcome. Native American populations are higher, perhaps 100 to 150 million people of indigenous descent in the Americas compared to roughly 50 to 70 million in our timeline. Native languages and cultures are more prevalent. In some regions, indigenous majority nations might exist, maintaining continuous governmental control from pre-colonial times. The United States might not exist as we know it. With different colonial powers and patterns, perhaps North America is divided into several nations: a French-speaking northern nation, an English eastern nation, and indigenous-controlled interior regions. Latin America's cultural mix is different. With higher native survival rates, mestizo culture develops differently, perhaps with stronger indigenous elements in language, religion, and governance. Christopher Columbus's voyage was a hinge point in history. The timing, circumstances, and consequences of that single journey shaped everything that followed. Delay it by just a few decades, and the entire modern world looks different. The Americas would still have been discovered. Europeans and indigenous peoples would still have met. But how, when, and under what circumstances matters enormously. Columbus's 1492 voyage wasn't inevitable. It was contingent, dependent on countless small decisions. And that's what makes history so fascinating. Tiny moments creating massive consequences that echo through centuries.